Welcome to the vaccine passport.
The concept raising a red flag about government overreach.
The White House is reportedly working on a vaccine passport program.
What is a vaccine passport? What should it be used for? What should it be incorporated in?
A so-called vaccine passport, which would allow Americans to prove they've been vaccinated against the coronavirus as businesses try to reopen, and would be free and available through applications for smartphones, which could display a scannable code similar to an airline boarding pass.
A demand to produce personal documents can be uncomfortable, but post-pandemic, it's something we'll all likely have to get more and more comfortable with.
New York State has already announced an app called Excelsior Pass. It can be used by New Yorkers to prove they have been fully vaccinated or have tested negative for COVID-19.
It's a smartphone app that acts as a COVID passport, so you can attend concerts, sporting events, other events, and beginning this week, it'll be accepted at dozens of arenas throughout New York State.
It also gives you an incentive to overcome vaccine hesitancy. Some people are not sure still whether they want to do the vaccine, but if you promise them more mobility, more ability to get a job, more ability to get travel, that's a very powerful incentive to actually achieve fuller vaccination.
Well, obviously, there's a lot of news reporters that are just giddy over the idea of selling away all of our rights, destroying our right to assemble, destroying our right to free speech, destroying our right to body autonomy. But there are some brave individuals, those that are not afraid to go onto those networks and speak the truth. Former Clinton advisor Naomi Wolf has been out there, a warrior, trying to warn people this may be the world's stupidest idea. Here's what she's been looking like in the news.
One strong global voice raising concerns about all this is Naomi Wolf.
Dr. Naomi Wolf.
Naomi Wolf is the author of The End of America.
Dr. Naomi Wolf, so excited that you could join us tonight.
She's the author, feminist and leftist activist, and she's been raising the alarm about the overreach of governments imposing pandemic lockdowns and restricting freedoms right around the world.
I can't say it forcefully enough. This is literally the end of human liberty in the West.
They're using orders that simply strip us of our rights, rights to property, rights to assembly, rights to worship, and all of the rights that our Constitution guarantees.
It is my honor and privilege to be joined now by author of The End of America, Dr. Naomi Wolf. Thank you so much for joining me.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I've been a fan as well.
All right. Well, let's get to it. A vaccine passport, an idea, and it's very insidious in the many different ways they're promoting it. At one point, you feel like the federal government's pushing it. They're like, oh, no, we're just asking private businesses to keep you from entering using a passport. The federal government won't be involved. But you've made some pretty strong statements about this. Tell me why. Why do you think that, in your words, this may be the point of no return?
Yeah, no, I will go further. It is the point of no return. I've been warning people ever since 2008, my book, The End of America, that there are 10 steps that would-be dictators always take when they want to close an open society. And people always say, tell us when we're at step 10. And we're at step 10. And the vaccine passport, you cannot come back from it. And I'm a CEO of a tech company, as well as being an author and a fellow at the American Institute of Economic Research. And so I understand what a lot of people, reasonably enough, don't understand about the absolutely catastrophic danger of a vaccine passport, which, by the way, the push for it has been rolled out around the world, in democracies around the world. It's been launched in Israel, and 4 months later, it completely ended Israeli civil society. It's an apartheid, more of an apartheid state now, between vaccinated and unvaccinated. And dissidents and activists are letting us know in Israel that they're surveilled and monitored and ostracized and marginalized, 24/7 now due to this vaccine passport. It's been rolled out in Denmark. It's being rolled out in Britain. It's being rolled out in Canada. And my own tyrannical governor, Governor Andrew Cuomo, has declared that the Excelsior Pass is going to be rolled out in New York State. So why is it so incredibly, it's beyond dangerous. Like, I try not to overstate things, but this is the end. You cannot roll this back. You can't make it better. Once it's out there, you and I can't meet in a bar or in a restaurant with our friends to have a conversation about how do we start a movement to get our freedoms back, because the app will know, and the app will have mapped, it can map. The danger about this app is not just the division of all of society into two groups, vaccinated and unvaccinated. That's just the beginning. What's really dangerous is that you don't have a choice about opting in or out in order to engage with society or to engage with the private sector. And what's incredibly dangerous is that, and I say this as a tech CEO, any functionality can be loaded onto it like that without any difficulty. So tomorrow, Apple Pay and Google Pay or Google Wallet, which already are talking about getting the contract for the vaccine passport, can seamlessly synthesize whether you get paid or not, whether you can turn on your revenue stream or not based on your vaccine status. AI can scan social media and feed that effortlessly into a social credit system where if I say the right things, I can go more places. And if I say the wrong things, I can't even get on the bus where I have to show my card. It can seamlessly geolocate you. It will. Every time you scan that code when you go to a restaurant, which has become the thing to do post COVID for no good reason epidemiologically, that's geolocating you, right? That's saying Naomi Wolf is at the, restaurant on this street and this street. And when other people scan their codes, it creates a network of you and all your friends, and there's software that shows kind of maps of everyone's social group and how they intersect with each other and interact with each other. So the app will scoop all of that up as well. But it literally turns overnight into a China-style social credit system. And as I've said elsewhere, how do you keep 1 billion, educated people who want freedom and democracy completely unable to revolt, as in China? Well, because they have this app basically with the functionalities loaded onto it, and the authorities can find any dissident or any critic within 5 minutes, and that's it, and that you could be switched off, turned off. So it's terrifying. And when I say there is no going back, like someone said on my Twitter feed, this is the hill to die on, and I said absolutely right. Like I don't literally want to do that,
Right.
but if there was ever a time for patriots and citizens and just people who love the freedoms of the West and around the world who love freedoms to not let something happen, now is the time, because there is no world in which we have any autonomy after this is over. And I'm not even talking about, the precedent of letting the government inject us with things that unless we let them inject us with the next thing, and then it'll go on to sterilization or et cetera.
I want to point to that too, because, I remember I was working on the CBS Talks with the doctors, and, I was always into doing stories. At one point, I wanted to do a facial recognition story about how all these, video cameras around the country, and the executive producer said to me, like, Del, why are you always into these stories? Like, I don't understand what the problem is with cameras that recognize you. If you're not breaking the law, what difference does it make? I said, well, it depends on what the law is. Something I do today may be considered illegal tomorrow, like gathering in a park, my First Amendment right. If that's made illegal, then I don't want them to know I'm there. And in this case, I think there's so many people that just think, well, I got my vaccine, or I believe in vaccines, who cares? But what happens if that's tracking you? What happens if the vaccine only lasts for 2 months? So now all of a sudden your green badge turns red and it doesn't work anymore, and they're following you wherever you are in town saying, by the way, it's illegal. A cop car shows up, grabs you because you were too near somebody, that has been vaccinated or whatever it is. They're carting you off to inject you again. You will have no control over this. And now we also live in a society, by the way, where apparently it's okay that we don't do safety trials, that we're going to do no long-term safety trials on future pharmaceutical products. 2 weeks, a month is good enough after the second shot. We won't know if it causes cancer. We don't know if it has something even more, diabolical. We don't care. You're going to have to get it. And so people aren't looking at the long term. It's just this sort of short-sighted, and they prey on that, right? They prey on the fact that we're so busy and we're just saying, take care of this for us.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of preying on us going on, but there's a massive, disinformation / propaganda campaign going on to force us to adopt it. Look, I was a political consultant at the highest levels, and what that taught me was to analyze events backward. And what I mean is, when you're a political consultant or you're in those rooms where history is made, the goal is identified. And then what happens is, how do we create a story to get people to adopt that goal? And then the goal is given to the message shop, and the message shop comes up with a story, right? That's why I often look at what's the outcome, because that's what the intention usually is. So, these lockdown measures are nonsensical. The data are in that states and countries that locked down, quote unquote, didn't do any better in terms of coronavirus than states and countries that were open. But the effect is, people will do anything to be free again. They will do anything to be able to go to that restaurant, go to that bar, sit in a park with their friends, go to church, go to synagogue. And so if you're going to have a goal of getting everyone to adopt this one technology that will basically enslave the world, and I'm not overstating that, that's not hyperbole, and will allow 6 people and China basically to be in charge of everything that happens, right? It's meta-national, it's above the level of the government. 6 tech bros and China will get to decide, what happens to everybody, whom to switch on, whom to switch off. If you want to do that, the way to do that is to have a pandemic. I'm not saying it wasn't real, but we know now that the PCR tests lead to false positives. We don't know the extent of the pandemic. We don't know if it's over because no one's letting us see the raw data sets for the PCR tests. Have measures that don't make any sense, keep kids home at school that doesn't make any sense scientifically, don't let people open their businesses, don't let people open their restaurants, drive the economy into crisis, give, a huge levels of mental health. And then everyone's like, fine, give it to me.
Obviously, you're scaring the hell out of me and everybody watching, and I get it. And I have been talking about these things too. But here's the elephant in the room. Here's the question. Since you have, you worked with Bill Clinton, as you said, you have worked in government. The thing that doesn't make sense to any of us is, why would the United States of America take part in this? Why would we want our data going to China? Why are we protecting China when it comes to this Wuhan virus? When all of a sudden did what I thought was an enemy, I'm not into enemies, I grew up a liberal, I'm all into, hey, we're all gonna get along, it's one world, all of those things. But if there were places we need to keep our eye on, it was like Russia, it was China. And now you're saying all of our data is going to go to China. It really feels like many of these decisions are never going to benefit the United States of America. I'm starting to be under the impression that my country that I grew up in, that celebrated being the beacon of freedom for the world, is no longer being governed from inside my borders. Am I getting it wrong? Why is America making this choice?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of other nations that are supposed to be free, open democracies are making the same choice.
Yeah, but I have the best one. Why are we making
this was the best of all. America's the best idea anyone ever had in history. I mean, I'll tell you my best understanding of that. And by the way, I'm not saying all our data is going to China, although a white paper from the Chinese Communist Party has been leaked. It's not classified, that basically says that China's plan by 2025 is to own everyone's medical data around the world, and by doing so create a kind of biofascism globally in which they are the superpower through the management of everyone's medical data. I think it's an alliance that I don't think is so intentional. I think China had an accidental release of a gain of function virus, but then saw, and this is often the case, it happens this way, consultant, nothing is more creative than a crisis. They saw their opportunity. It devastated the rest of the world. And as it was devastating the rest of the world, other entities like big tech companies, big pharma, saw their opportunity. They're up 25%, 50%. Amazon is up, triple figure billions because of this pandemic, because of pandemic policies. So they're never going to want the crisis to end, right? And what it does is it forces everyone onto technology platforms. So all these human spaces where we used to worship or we used to be in classrooms, from tech companies' point of view, these are empty spaces because they're not monetizing them. So all the eyeballs go onto tech platforms, Zoom, which is owned by China, and so it's an alliance that was probably inadvertent between 6 global corporations big pharma and China all heading in the same direction of totalitarianism toward us. But what is happening, I never wanted to say this in public, but I guess the time has come. The most thoughtful people I know in the world of statecraft and analysis and intelligence are pretty worried that the Chinese Communist Party has been basically engaging in what China calls asymmetrical warfare, which means winning a war without firing a shot. And the way that's been done is through buying up Western leaders, influencers, news outlets, cultural venues, even down to the level of local government officials. And that's been kind of dormant and quiet, sleeper cells, as some of my intelligence friends would say, not in a super dramatic way, but now all of this is kind of, the time has come to kind of manifest what analysts of statecraft call a perforated state, that basically our America has been so perforated by this influence, that is designed to tenderize us as an enemy. And so look at the policies that have followed this pandemic. They make no sense unless the goal is to weaken the United States. Our children haven't been in school for a year. They are self-harming. They have no faith in the future. Our economy is driven into the ground. Unemployment is in double digits. Our social bonds are dissolved in a very Chinese Communist Party way. We're not allowed to worship. We're not allowed to gather. We can't go to town halls and, have freedom of speech and legislation, the kind of freedom of speech that our legislation permits us, because we can't get off of Zoom to physically go to a town hall and meet our neighbors and say, what are we going to do about our community? We're demoralized. Our divisions have never been greater. Technology amplifies and makes sure that critical voices are censored, as my voice and doubtless your voice, and many critics have been censored by the big tech platforms. But if you look at the big picture, it is to weaken and demoralize the United States. I mean, that's the language that Soviet propaganda uses.
I know I'm putting you on the spot, but I don't get a chance to sit down with someone that has your information, and so I really want to ask you this. So then you said we're weakening, demoralizing America. You also said when you work for the President of the United States that what you do is you look at the end goal and you work backwards how to get there. What you're saying is the end goal of the leadership of the United States of America is to weaken and demoralize the greatest nation in the world?
I did not say that. Please don't put those words in my mouth.
All right, I won't. I'll give you them. Then please, I'm just putting two thoughts in. Then what are you saying?
Sure. I have no evidence that the leadership of the United States is implicated in this. But what I am seeing all around me are policies that don't make sense unless there's another influence, right?
Okay.
So we could look at the Gates Foundation, which Rainer Fullmich, who's a lawyer in Germany, I'm sure you know or reported on, he's identified that the Gates Foundation is kind of flowing billions into the New York Times, BBC, NPR. Actually, another reporter did that, and he's using the documentation of the Gates Foundation's influence. The Gates Foundation gives money to the CDC Foundation, millions of dollars a year, right? So, the Gates Foundation gives money to lobbyists for K through 12 education in the United States, community groups for vaccine education and COVID education. So millions and millions and millions are flowing into all of our civil society leaders and groups. And what we're experiencing
so are they sort of, what do you call that? Sort of they're ignorant puppets for this system. They don't really maybe know what's going on. They're so influenced by the specialists around them. They don't know where their funding's coming from, by the news agencies, by their health expert, or by their, social or intellectual experts, that all those people are being influenced so that it just permeates our governmental system?
Well, not just government, private sector. I mean, I don't have evidence that there are people bought off in the United States government. I just want to make that really clear. But what is corruption? Is it not corruption that the Gates Foundation gives, which invests in vaccines, distributes vaccines, Bill Gates has patents for vaccines, and Microsoft is one of the people who is proposing the contract for the vaccine passport. Is that not a conflict that he gives 12 to 17 millions to the CDC Foundation, or to the New York Times? I know as a journalist that, journalism, as a journalist, journalism is so broke right now that if someone says, I'll give you $10 million a year for vaccine education or coronavirus education, that sounds so benign. And if you're the New York Times or NPR, you can say to yourself, well, we're people of integrity. We're not going to be corrupted. We'll continue to do our reporting. But you know perfectly well they're not going to do the hard-hitting, critical reporting on the fact that the AstraZeneca vaccine was suspended in 21 countries. It was on Twitter was keeping track. And the New York Times eventually said 4 countries. And, it's shocking, but that $10 million is the difference between survival and death for even a news outlet as big as the New York Times, or eventual death. So these are powerful forces, and they're all kind of in a whirlpool of creating a situation in which our leaders and our news outlets are not responsive to us, and therefore something as dangerous and tyrannical as this vaccine passport can get introduced and lobbied for. It doesn't have to be like a nefarious, evil thing to persuade President Biden or Vice President Harris that their big tech donors want to be helpful. This will allow everyone to open up. Just roll out a vax passport. We're Microsoft. We give you all this money, for you to run for re-election or for Dems to run. That's how business is done. And you don't have to say to people, this will destroy everyone's liberties. There's deniability. You say, this will make it easier. Lots of people want it. And then you place, and then other people in their PR companies place those positive articles in big news outlets. And then suddenly everyone's like, I can't leave my home unless, I let the state dictate what goes into my body. It's literally that quick.
Naomi, I can tell that you approach journalism and look at the world the same way I do. I see that you're reticent to make people evil. The term I was looking for, I just got is useful idiots. I mean, there's a lot of useful idiots in the world, I think, and it's because they have certain passions. I think they want to do right, and I even think some of these people like Bill Gates may very well think that he's the only one that knows how to save the world, and therefore has some sort of bizarre God complex that has massive conflicts of interest in everything that he does. Very quickly, though, because your book is so brilliant, The End of America, and it really gives you perspective to realize that this vaccine passports is sort of number 10. Let's just very quickly look at the list from your book of sort of the top 10 ways that we get to the end of America. Invoke a terrifying internal and external enemy, create a gulag, develop a thug caste, set up an internal surveillance system, harass citizens groups, engage in arbitrary detention and release, target key individuals, control the press. Dissent equals treason. We're just talking about that with our scientists right now. They're not allowed to dissent against the status quo, and then suspend the rule of law, which be essentially you no longer control your own body. You believe that this passport, we are now stepping into number 10?
Yeah, it's not a passport, it's a yellow star. And I say that, as the granddaughter of someone who lost 7 or 8 brothers and sisters to the Holocaust. It's not a passport. That's a euphemism. It's the beginning of the end of your right to control your body, your movement, your income, your privacy, your sex life, your family life, and literally, the history of pharmaceuticals and the state means that if you think it's going to stop with one coronavirus injection, you are sadly misguided. Next, it will be, one child instead of 2, or else you get a red mark, or sterilization, or I hate to think what else, someone needs a kidney. I mean, it's not going to stop
control
there.
of your body, then what else is there? And once you
may I just say, like, just to chime in, I'm of the party that stood up for my body, my choice. I'm pro-choice. The whole rhetoric of, you know, the Democratic Party and progressives is the state has no right to intervene between me and my private medical decisions. And that is out the window with this. So it's absolutely terrifying. On a happier note, I've mobilized with the many hundreds of people who are writing to me, and my platform Daily Cloud is launching a project to showcase a legislation to ban vaccine passports. I want people to find out about that and go to dailycloud.io.
Okay.
It's give me 24 hours to get the description up. But there's already really great legislation. The last email I had was from Massachusetts to pass a ban on vaccine passports. And we want to create model legislation for 5 freedoms: no masks, open schools, free assembly, no vaccine passports, and no emergency measures, and pass those in 50 states.
Amen.
This is it. This is the battle.
This is it. This is it. This is the hill to die on. The battle is at our front door. We must stand up now and fight for freedom. As I've said before, as our founding fathers did, this is one of those founding fathers moments. It's in our DNA. We must wake up. You're doing a brilliant job to help our nation and the world wake up. You are brave. You're a hero. And I really appreciate that you joined us today and gave us your perspective on these matters.
Honor.
They're very, very serious.
Thank you. I appreciate what you're doing as well.
All right. Take care. If you like that clip, then be sure to check out our live broadcast of The High Wire every Thursday morning at 11 a.m. Pacific Time. You can watch it on Facebook, YouTube, iTunes, and Twitter. We'll see you there.